Let's begin to pray and ask the Lord to speak to hearts and lives tonight, and that the Lord would add His anointing. If you'll do that with me now. Father, tonight we're thankful for the great opportunity to declare the precepts and the Word of God, the very direction of the Spirit tonight. I'm asking you, Lord, that you'll overshadow those families and homes and marriages tonight, God, that are in need of a word of encouragement, of wisdom, advice. Lord, as we continually follow you, we know there's an enemy who is prowling in the background, always doing everything he can to seek, to steal, kill, and destroy. And so right now I'm asking you, God, that you'll overshadow the words that I'm about to speak. Let them become power and life to the hearer. We're going to give you praise and glory and honor for everything that is accomplished in this service tonight. Lord, for those that are at home that are sick, we pray, God, for their bodies tonight. For those that are on the front lines of the medical field and what have you, Lord, that are just dealing with different situations within hospitals and things of that nature during this coronavirus. I'm praying, God, that you'll give them strength, touch the families who have sick loved ones and have lost loved ones. And we're going to give you praise for everything that is accomplished. In Jesus' name, we should all be able to say amen. And I want to say again, it is not exactly the ideal thing that we'd like to do. We'd love to be able to just gather together as we have in times in the past as a church and just collectively worship the Lord, because that's what my heart's desire. I love to be with the family of God, and I know some of you do as well. And so tonight I'm thankful that we still have the ability to reach into your homes and into your cell phones and tablets or whatever to be able to give you the gospel and to give you the inspiration of the Lord. And so tonight we're going to endeavor to do just exactly that. We are trying to get together for this Sunday service, maybe some potential to gather together here in the sanctuary. I still want to ensure that I'm keeping with guidelines and such as that. If you didn't get a call out today, I did a call out earlier today for the church to let everyone know if we can get within the restrictions that maybe we can space out and still have church. I know some have mentioned they may be interested in doing that. So if you haven't already, if you get a chance, if you will, do me a big favor and send me a text message or let me know if you might be one of those that you know for sure that you'd like to be here. If it's going to be 30 or 40 people that say the same thing, something different, may have to go back to an outside service, but we'll see how it goes. But again, thank you for tuning in. If you get a minute, maybe you can reach over and share you with someone, and maybe someone else could be blessed at this time and season. So getting ready here in just a moment, I have asked my wife to join me tonight, and she didn't have any real prep time in this. She's just going to join me in the dialogue. I'm going to be stepping away tonight from the traditional midweek message that I may normally would give. But I do feel strongly that I'm following the leading of the Lord in doing this, because this is something that's been in my spirit for over a week now. And if any of you that know anything about the Church of God, you may already know that over the years we have had something that we called Family Training Hour. And that is what a lot of the Church of God has done for many years during the midweek service. And most of you know, as far as preaching is concerned, if there's anything that I love to do, I absolutely love to preach the Word of God. And so tonight's message may be a break away from the traditional, but I've learned something during this virus and everything we have experienced in the last couple of weeks, and that's just stepping out of the box of the norm, doing things we've never done before. And so maybe we can break the routine of going through the motions. But you at home, you pray for us that we'll follow the leading of the Lord. And if you have a marriage tonight, maybe you've gone through some difficulties, I want you to stay tuned in tonight. My wife and I are going to share some thoughts from our heart, some things God's been dealing with me about. And maybe you have been cooped up, as we say here in the South, with your family in the home during this lockdown, and you've experienced a lot of tension. Maybe yourself, you've dealt with a lot of stress, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and things of that nature. We're going to talk about some of those things tonight as they affect the home. And you may wonder to yourself, why would we want to talk about these things? You know, shouldn't we preach a sermon about, Noah and the ark or something like that. We're going to connect the text tonight God's given me with this thought. But I want you to understand the value of the home tonight. You see, there are many of us that serve the Lord, and the devil knows that you wouldn't pick up a joint and smoke some marijuana. Maybe you wouldn't go down to the liquor store and buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, or maybe he knows that you wouldn't be interested in the potential for an affair. But the enemy does know that the people that are closest to us and the people that we love the most are often the people that if he can work his way into the home, he can destroy us. Now, over the years, I have seen many people, many that have been in ministry, who faithfully served the Lord. But over the years, they allowed the enemy to get into their home and to their families, their marriages and relationships, and many families have been destroyed as a result of that. And so we're going to talk about some of those things tonight. Maybe you're watching right now and you know somebody that could benefit from this. I want you to share it with them. We're not here to call anybody out or put anybody on blast, as we say. But tonight we want to talk about some things that are going to work and integrate into the family and into the home. So if you have a Bible ready or somewhere close by, I want you to look with me in the book of Genesis tonight. We're going to turn to a familiar story to some of those of you who have been around the church for a while. But this is found in Genesis chapter number 13, and we're going to begin reading there at verse number 1. Genesis 13 and verse number 1. And the Bible says here in Genesis 13 and 1, it said, Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Sound like a good thing to do, don't it? And Lot also which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Verse number 6. Now I want you to pay close attention to verse 6. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Did you hear that? So that they could not dwell together. Verse number 7. And there was strife. If you're at home, I want you to say this with me. Strife. There was strife. There was strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife. Have you ever felt that way within your home? Please, let's all just get along. Can we just have a little peace? Isn't that what we all want in our homes? He said, I pray thee between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Now listen to what he says here. Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou wilt depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Tonight we're going to talk on a subject entitled that the Lord just put in my spirit on domestic dispute. Domestic dispute. If you've ever heard the term, sometimes in law enforcement, when there's something going on within a home, if there is some violence, some physical or verbal altercation going on within a home, sometimes people will call 911 or they'll call the police department. And then the police show up and try to work on or advocate to resolve the domestic dispute and to resolve the conflict. That is what we see maybe even in today's society as a great deal of domestic dispute, even as we speak right now across the land. One of the things that I wanted to use here as a backdrop, if you will, dealing with Abraham and Lot, is to bring out something for a platform to preach from tonight, and that being that you've got two men who, from all accounts, we would believe that both of these men, they loved God. We know without a doubt that Abraham was a man of God who loved God. And he's got his nephew Lot traveling along with him. And you know, because of the blessing of the Lord that is upon him, that both of them have increase in their life. It is important for us to understand tonight that any time that God is blessing us, many times the people that are closest to us are also beneficiaries of the overflow of that blessing. But as you begin to read, you understand here that what began to take place is that these two families grow, they experience increase, their possessions increase, their cattle and their herdsmen, everything is increasing. But I want you for just a moment, before I get right into the depth of what the Lord put in my spirit, I want you to imagine with me what it must be like to be Abraham and all of Abraham's stuff, to be Lot and all of his stuff, and you've got two different families, if you will, two different parties, two representing families who are in contrast with one another because it's almost as if they're on top of each other. So when Abraham's herdsmen take their cattle down to the water hole and they're trying to get their cattle fed, you've got Abraham and Lot's herdsmen trying to feed at the same time. Dissension and tension begins to rise between these two good families. You see, the thing that I admire about Abraham is that Abraham is wise enough to see the turmoil as it begins to present itself. And I want to encourage you tonight to have a wisdom likened unto Abraham, because I believe tonight that if we as a family intend to continue to have any form of peace, if we intend to hang on to the marriage, if we intend to hold on to sanity, we're going to have to recognize the problem and be willing to address it from the very beginning. I believe that it could be cowardly for us to just simply say, well, I'll just run to my little corner and just let everybody have their way and I won't say anything. I believe that it is appropriate for us to effectively and with wisdom work through whatever may be in front of us so that we can have healthy families. Now, you may say, what does it really matter what is going on behind the four walls of our home tonight, Pastor? Well, I can first tell you this. Whatever goes on in that home will also be a launching pad for your children in years to come. The way that a husband treats his wife will have a lot to do with the way his son may treat his wife. It doesn't always work that way, but many times it does. And vice versa. The way that a woman may talk to her husband and treat her husband can also have a residual effect on how that she will act whenever she becomes a wife in years to come. The way that a husband and a father makes a role model within the home will often have a great deal to do with what kind of husband that a young daughter may look for when she gets older. So the things we're doing in the home is not just something because of our children, but it also is a reflection of who we are and our character. Years ago, I heard a statement, and that statement was, character is what you are behind four walls. Your image a lot of times in the public eye, what everybody sees of you, you know, that's really not so much your character. But the man that you really are is the man that you are behind the scenes. When nobody's looking, when nobody can pat you on the back, for the preachers, when nobody's there to say amen when you're preaching or pat you on the back in the foyer and tell you what a great job you've done, character is the man you really are at home. I would go as far tonight to tell you that character is the man that your children know you are. Character is the woman that your children know you are. Pastors, character is the man that your pastor's wife, your wife knows that you are. And these are things that are a reflection, and they will show up in the outside eventually, even though people try to conceal who they really are. So tonight we're going to deal with some of these subjects. And like I said, I've invited my wife to join me. We're going to step away from the normal and the usual routine tonight. And we're going to use this story of Abraham and Lot and the strife that went on there and these domestic issues to be able, as a launching pad, to preach or teach or to advise you on how that we can maintain that peace within our own lives. One of the things that I want you to see about the dwelling place where the family gathers together, where we all are what we call a home. I want to tell you tonight, the home is raw. I want you to remember that tonight. The home is a raw place. It's there that I find our home is the most raw image of who we really, really are. There are things that often go on behind closed doors that we may not want anybody in the church to know anything about. You may not want people to know that you got into an argument before you came to church and put on your worship and your shouting shoes and danced around the church and spoke in tongues. You may not want people to know that you and your wife got into a big altercation last week and she got mad and threw something at you. There are real things that go on in the home. Years ago, I remember something. I shared this here a while back. It was a story of something that really broke me in my spirit. But at a time when I was pastoring, and I had a young woman who was a mother at the time, and she had a couple children, and one of them, I want to say, was around the age of about 9 or 10 years old. And one day, we got a phone call from this woman. She called my wife, and she was crying on the other end of the phone. You couldn't really understand what she was saying. She was really torn to pieces, and by the time my wife finally got to what it was that she was saying, she began to realize that the problem was this sister was reaching out to my wife saying that she just got angry with her 9 or 10-year-old daughter and had jumped on top of her, straddle ways, and punched her in the face, bloodied her nose, and the child was in the other room and wanted my wife to get in her car and drive an hour to their residence to make sure that her daughter was okay. And I'm assuming some of it had to do with the guilt of not wanting to see just what damage that she had done. My wife, she got into the car. She rode over there. She said, I remember trying to embrace this young little girl and tears running down her cheeks and what have you. And you see, the thing that I want you to understand from that is this woman at the time was a choir leader in our church. She was helping lead the music and the worship. And she would get up and get excited like anybody else would. And you see, you have to remember that you're not exempt from the attacks of the enemy, that spiritual wickedness in high places will not come into your home. And you feel good. You go to church, you go to the altar, you worship the Lord, and things seem real good. And then you get home and things blow apart. And let me tell you what happens to us. We feel vulnerable and we don't want anybody to know because we have such an image to maintain. I want you to understand tonight that has caused a lot of people who will not be real and own up to what is really going on until they end up losing their marriage, until they end up losing their children, until they end up doing something that causes them to go to jail. You see, I believe that we have an image to uphold as a child of God. But if we need help, we need to get before the Lord and we need to address and deal with the subjects and issues that are going on in the home. I cannot tell you how many times as a pastor that I've had people in the church come to me and tell me, Pastor, I just want you to know. Now, we're talking about a family that has been faithfully coming to the church. The husband gets up and gets in while I'm preaching. Everything looks good on the surface. And the wife looks at me with tears running down her face and says, Pastor, I caught my husband looking at pornography the other day. It blew up into a big argument. They were on the edge or verge of a divorce. There are things that are instigators within the home. How exactly do we deal with those things? And that is the question that tonight that I think is very relevant and important for us to realize. You see, I know people say things tonight like, what you see is what you get. Sometimes people will make or insinuate, well, when you see me, what you see is what you get. I'm the same way at home as I am everywhere. I want to tell you something tonight. Some people may be a little more consistent in what they are in and out of the church. But I do not believe tonight that everybody is 1,000%, if I can say that, exactly the same raw that they are at home or anywhere else. There may be some people that got it mostly together. But what I find is, let me tell you the reason why I believe that. And I'm going to prove to you what I'm saying. You see, even as a pastor, there are people that look to you. And there are people that respect you. There are people on your job that have a certain level of respect with you. But you know there are limitations that you cannot cross with those people lest you ruin your reputation. There are things that you may be more careful how you say it. But let me tell you what happens when you get home. When you get home, you become raw and real. Just like my wife teases around about when she gets off work, she goes home, she relaxes. She lets her hair down, she puts on her pajamas, she takes it easy. Do you know what happens when we get home from a job after we've had a rough day? We've dealt with a lot of hard-headed, stubborn people. Traffic is bumper to bumper and foolish things, bills that are piling up, not getting our check deposited on time. I mean, all kinds of things we deal with. Finding out that our kids have not been doing their homework, telling us that they have. All of these things. Now you're at home. Now you're at home, and all of a sudden the avalanche comes down. You haven't been able to vent anywhere else all day long, and guess what you do? You let it all hang out. You let it all hang out. It reminds me of something not too long ago that I began to think of, and that is the fact that, we are vulnerable in our homes because many of us don't have a safe place. Many of us don't have a friend or somebody else we can confide in. And sometimes we are guilty of taking things out on the people we love the most. You see, there's a side to all of us that many will never see except those people who actually live in our homes. You know why that's a sad thing? Because in reality, you can bring your kids to church. The pastor can do everything he can to try to instruct them, to lead them, to guide them. But if you do not uphold at home what the preacher's preaching from the pulpit, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. You want your children to serve the Lord. You've got to lead by example, and I believe that's something that we all understand. But what is it about the home that opens up the door to so much turmoil? Many of the reason, or one of the main reason I could say tonight, is because we are so familiar with one another that sometimes we're too comfortable to just say whatever comes to our mind. You ever meet anybody that just says whatever's on their mind? Yeah, there's a handful of those people. Now, when I was aggravated in the flesh and I wanted somebody to know how I felt, I kind of wish one of them people are around to take up for me and just tell somebody what I wanted to say but couldn't. But that was in my flesh. You see, most of us don't really care for somebody that just says whatever's on their mind, because usually people like that hurt a lot of people's feelings. Those are the kind of people that'll look at a newborn baby sitting in the carrier and look down. Oh, boy, he's got a big nose. He takes after your dad. Oh, he's got some big ears. He takes after your mama. Oh, he looks like your husband. He's got the biggest set of lips I've ever seen. People that say things that are just, you know what I mean? Those are the kind of people that hurt people's feelings because they have no filter. They say whatever's on their mind. Do you know that we are guilty of doing that? And that creates a lot of domestic tension within the home, because when we become familiar with one another and the barrier's torn down, it's almost like, I don't care if I don't have to worry about my testimony at home. That's my wife. I can say whatever I want to. If she makes me mad, I can fuss at her. Some of the things that you would do and say to your family, you would never say to people outside the church. There are things and ways you act and the way you deal with stuff. I believe that God ought to convict our heart, and that's the reason why a lot of times families can't get along, is because people don't have a filter. They look at it like, well, it's just, I've known her since she was in diapers. That don't give you a right to treat or talk to somebody like a pile of trash. If you're at home, you ought to be able to say amen. Type amen or shout amen. Listen, my wife has asked me this before, and I want to tag this right along. My wife has asked me in the past. She said, honey, why aren't you as compassionate with me as you are with church folks? So, one thing about me, if you know me at all, I try to be transparent. I don't never want to uphold some sort of image that is unrealistic, because I think you set people up for failure when you do that. I think people appreciate transparency more than they do somebody just trying to act like they're always right. But in my own home, I've often shared things and making my own self vulnerable for the sake of judgment and criticism, but at the same cost of possibly helping somebody to understand that the bar is not, it's a high bar, don't get me wrong, but I don't want you to think you're the only crazy family out there. I don't want you to think that your family's beyond help. Now, there's been a few that I thought maybe they might have been, but I doubt that yours is. But listen, my wife has asked me before, said, honey, Why are you not as compassionate with me like you are with the church people? So she comes to me with a problem or tells me something that's bothering her, and I'll just say, honey, you just don't have faith like you need to. Or, honey, I'm just kind of a little coarse, maybe a little bit rough. And I just shoot straight to the point. Why are you letting that person, get to you like that? You know better, blah, blah, blah. And it's something that maybe in reality that I may not say to somebody in the church. I might be real gentle with them. Well, brother, you really had a bad childhood, and and you really have been working a lot of hours, and so I really feel bad for you. What I'm saying is that we are often rough with the people that we live with. You agree? We are rough with the people we live with a lot of times. And so home is where frustrations are often vented that we're not allowed to vent at work or on people that have caused us to be upset in the first place. You see, if I use my wife for an example, my wife works in a hospital and she works in a professional environment. If she deals sometimes with some of the rudest, most disrespectful patients you could ever imagine. She'll ask them, what is your name and date of birth? She has to verify it on a piece of paper. It's protocol. And they look at her with the ugly face and they say, you already know what it is. Why are you asking me again? Now listen, when you deal with that all day long, one after another, then you get home and you got to hear about how bad your husband's day was, and you got to hear about how that there ain't enough money to pay this bill, and so-and-so's mad because of this, and now you get a phone call, somebody else airing out their problem, and somebody else calling you, gossiping and airing out somebody else's dirty laundry, and there you're sitting and you're trying to take it easy, and you're mad, but you're home, so you have the ability to vent. And guess what you end up doing? You take your frustrations out on people who often don't deserve it. People who really, really, truly don't deserve it. Have you ever done that before? I mean, can you be honest tonight? Have you ever done that before? Have you ever been guilty of that? Let me ask you a question tonight. Have you ever been acting a fool? Have you ever been acting ugly? And all the time you're thinking to yourself, I'm acting like a jerk. I am acting terrible. You know you're doing it. You know that you're not acting right. Why do we do that? Sometimes I believe that we need a place to vent, but sadly, we often vent it on the wrong people, and I think we all ought to be able to agree with that. I think that sometimes what happens is that this frustration it comes out in the home. But I want to talk to those of us that are in ministry for just a minute, because I think my wife would agree with me tonight. But ministry, I believe, adds another layer of vulnerability and another layer of frustration, because ministers, you preachers and preachers' wives, we live in a glass house. Everybody's always watching us. If you go to the store, you gotta have every I dotted and every T crossed. If you're in the church, even when people hurt your feelings, you got to smile like you don't hurt on the inside. So the only place you preachers and preachers' wives and church leaders have of privacy is your home. If you're like us, we guard that privacy. We guard, because one of the only private places of our whole life is in our home. And so that is one of the reasons why. Now, everybody's different. It's one of the reasons why that my wife and I, over the years, we guard that as sacred. And we don't just have people over at our house all the time, because it's the only place we have to just be able to relax and enjoy each other's company without being in a glass box. But that the problem is that living in such a glass box everywhere that we go creates an even greater tendency to unload in the home. You'd be surprised how many couples are great in ministry. A preacher that can preach the paint off the walls. A wife that's a great pastor's wife. I mean, they're great as a team together, and they do wonderful. But the pressures of ministry are about to ruin their marriage. I don't know if that's you tonight, but I hope that you'll understand where I'm headed tonight. I got a lot of things to cover, and I hope you'll stay in here with me. And if you know somebody that could be blessed by this, please share this with them. I want to share a few things with you tonight, because it's been a long time, I believe, since we have seen a potential for domestic issues like we have been. I don't believe we've lived through a time that domestic issues have been on the rise and we've been tested in the home like we have during this coronavirus lockdown. During the last few weeks, People have been on top of each other in homes. People have had to deal with each other like they've never before. You know, it may not be a very popular thing, but I've met a few wives and I've met a few husbands over the years that say, I'll be glad when he goes back to work because he's about to drive me crazy. Some people actually need a little bit of space away from each other instead of always being on top of each other. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But I've had a heavy heart over this last week with the subject of domestic disputes for quite a while now. I heard one pastor mention something the other day which has really, really stuck with me. And he made the statement, he said that he was talking to a sheriff, I believe it was in his hometown. And he said that he made a joking gesture to this police officer, and he said, "You guys are probably really slow right now." And that sheriff responded back to him. He said, "Actually, we're not really that slow right now." He said, "Actually, we're busier than we have been," he said, "with domestic dispute calls." He said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, child abuse, spouse abuse, verbal confrontations we're having to break up, people that are getting drunk and acting crazy. I mean, drugs, you name it. Domestic issues within the home. Families that cannot get along because they're all cooped up, as we say in the South, all on top of each other." And you know, that stuck with me because the reality is, I don't know of a better time than tonight to be able to discuss such an issue with you. And I'm going to go through a few things so you understand. The realities of the pressure and tension that takes place within our home has the kind of tension that leads to divorce, violence, suicide, infidelity, murder, and child abuse. I want to share a few things with you that I found today. My wife's going to interject a few things here in a minute if the Lord lays it on her heart. I just told her I want you to be here with me as I have a little dialogue maybe with the church and each other. But the New York Times reported a notable rise in domestic disputes during the coronavirus lockdown. A high notable rise. Domestic violence websites themselves and support groups are seeing a surge in visitors. So all these websites that are there to advocate for people that are a victim of abuse, they're seeing an uptick and a rise and a surge, if you will, in the people that are going to these websites during this time. The lockdown has brought on a major spike of domestic violence, as reported just recently in India, where they're saying that a lot of the women there, they're showing up of women being abused, sexually abused, and many of them that are being beaten by the people that are living in the home, those men. One sheriff's office that I read about reported a 75% increase in domestic dispute calls. In the UK, reports say that women killed by men during the coronavirus is up 3 times higher than average right now. The Treasure Coast reported a 79% increase in domestic disputes. Children's hospitals and child abuse hotlines have seen a surge in cases and calls. The hotline calls said that they have received 20% increase in calls. And then finally, I could go on and on and on. But right before I left tonight, I read where Channel 9, a local news station here in Orlando, just tonight reported that trauma centers, places like Arnold Palmer that are for children, these places where they're dedicated to children. I want that to sink in, children. That they have seen a rise in these trauma centers, about 4 times as many trauma cases to children by adults. That ought to trouble us tonight. Do you know that you may think, well, that don't happen in Christian homes? And let me tell you that every one of us every day are doing everything we can to be upright and live upright. But the moment that you think that you're exempt and it would never happen in your home, look out, like an Amtrak train coming, it'll hit you wide open. Because that's the way that the enemy works. You see, the devil knows that the most intimate thing tonight that we have outside of Christ is our families, and no wonder why he does all he can to divide and destroy us. I want you to think about that tonight. The devil knows that the most intimate thing that you and I have, the thing that means the most to me, is my family. He knows that if he can't get to me through a lust or an affair or a perversion or some addiction or some trying maybe some alcohol, He knows if he can't get to me through that, you know how he can get to me? He can get to me in the things that I love the most. And that is where the devil wants to destroy marriages. He wants to destroy homes. He wants to destroy relationships and bonds between moms and children, between husbands and fathers and children. That's exactly what the devil wants to do. You see, what is it that makes it so easy for the enemy to infiltrate good marriages and good people is because for many of us, I don't want you to miss this, the only conflict resolution that some of us know is what we saw growing up in the home or what we have picked up or seen through the years. I recall my own dad explaining to me, without going into all kind of details, we don't have time, I have so much ground to cover tonight. But I remember my own father explaining to me in so many words, apologizing. He said, son, I did the best I could. He said, my dad died at 17 years old. And he went through a great ordeal. My heart breaks to know what my dad must have went through at 17 years old to lose his dad. That's a difficult thing. Some people grew up in homes where they never had a dad. I know how it feels. My dad, I call him my dad. As far as I'm concerned, he's my dad. He's the only one that acted like a dad in my life. But my blood father, apparently, he didn't want anything to do with me, or he would have tried to come around and have something to do with me, and that made me live with a sort of a complex within myself all of my life. But my point is this tonight. Many people, they're only acting out what they saw when they were growing up. We've got people that are doing the best they can. Do you know when you get married and you try to raise a family, they don't really come. And I know that we have the Bible, and don't misunderstand me here, but families don't come with an instruction packet. We don't have instruction manuals. You know, there's literature that is written, you understand. But it's not like somebody comes to us and gives us a manual that tells us how to be a good wife and how to be a good husband. Those are things that we're supposed to learn as children, from our parents. And while a lot of parents do a great job, children may go on their own way and do their own thing and may not even follow that pattern. But by and large, a lot of the insecurities and a lot of the issues that we have, domestic issues, are a product of what someone saw when they were younger. So that raises two things that I want to talk to you about for a minute. First of all, those of us that may have been brought up in a good environment and have got a good skill maybe, or have obtained some good ways to deal with things. And must I say, every family's got a little crazy in it, just so you know. You have to be able to look at other people that may not have, and have a little compassion towards those who may not have had that in their life, because the reality is some may be doing the best they can and they don't know any different. The second thing that I want you to understand, that doesn't give people a free pass to act stupid. It really doesn't. Because if you got time, breath, and space in life, you can learn the right way to do things. You have to want to. And you have to be willing to work at it. You cannot, for the rest of your life, say, well, my dad beat his wife, so I'm just going to keep on beating on you, honey. That's not right. If you call yourself a child of God, it is God's will for you to do what's right. And you may not have had that model in your life, but I believe that you can look to someone else and you can start making efforts to make things right in your life. I believe that. But I want to try to help us tonight with some things that I believe may save somebody's marriage. I said earlier, there may be somebody watching, you've got some stuff going on in your marriage right now, and maybe you want to try to save your marriage. Maybe your marriage is on the rocks. Maybe you just know any minute that anything could just erupt and fall apart, that you're not talking anymore like you used to. All you do is argue all the time. Maybe that's the case. I want to try to share some things that may be able to help you. And you may say, well, how are you qualified to do this? Well, no, I'm not 96 years old and been married for 150 years. I don't know how that'd be possible at 96, but I have been married for quite a while. My wife and I, we got together when she was 13, and I was 15 years old. I'm now 46 years old, and we've been married ever since she was 18 years old. I'm not going to tell you how old she is, but she's not far away from me. But what I want you to understand tonight, I don't claim to be the most qualified person to be able to declare these things to you, but I feel like I've got a pretty good marriage. But I'm going to be the first to tell you that I have yet to see a perfect marriage. The reality is that people look at other people and they gaze from afar, and then they see the dysfunctional aspect of their own marriage, and they think, my marriage will never be that. You'd be surprised to know just how many times, as much as I told you earlier that I make myself vulnerable and transparent for the sake of maybe helping somebody, there's been times we've had arguments. There's been times that we have not, we call it loud discussions, where that there's trouble in the parsonage. And we do everything we can to hold it together. But I've been pastoring this church in 12 years, so you can imagine that in 12 years I've had to go to the pulpit, and I was mad as you can imagine. On the way to church, we got into an argument. Before church, we were looking at each other aggravated, not saying anything. And I got to get up and preach the fire. Domestic stuff. So I may not be the most qualified person, but I do feel like I can share some things that I've had to learn over the years. And I want to share some of those things with you tonight. And Sister Myers is going to try to help me with this as well. The first thing that I want to share with you tonight is you got to know who and what and where the real problem is. You got to know who, what, and where the real problem is. Suppose your spouse came home tonight and just had an absolutely horrible day, and they come home and start taking it out on everybody. Well, the initial response from me, let's just say it's Sister Myers, losing her temper or whatever and going crazy on everybody in the house. Could be the other way around, but we're going to say it's you tonight. I can look at the situation and think that it's all about me. It's me that she's mad at. It's me that she's flying off. It's me that she's so aggravated about. But you have to be able to understand and distinguish the who, the what, and the where. I'm talking about me for a minute. So I have to be able to look and realize there are contributing factors that have gone on during the day. I told you earlier, this doesn't give people a free pass to act a fool. But I do want you to be able to have a little bit of compassion, because if you plan or intend to be in any marriage or relationship for any length of time, you need to know this. You have to be able to look at that other person and realize there are things that are contributing to this person's anxiety. Sometimes a person is going through a place in their life where there's insecurities in their family. Maybe they're feeling like they're not loved because they haven't had a family member reach out to them in a while. Maybe they had a blow up at work. Maybe something has happened during that day. Let me ask you a question, those of you that are listening and watching. Have you ever had a time before that you just felt irritable? You just felt upset, and you really couldn't remember why? I've had times like that before, and I was sitting, I'm thinking, and the more I began to think, I began to realize earlier in that day something was said, and it had been bothering me without me even realizing it all day long. You see, I'll put it, I hate to use the word victim here, but I'll just say if I was the victim in the situation and Sister Myers came home like that, I have to be able to have enough compassion to understand I wasn't with her. I don't know what patient did what. I don't know what frustration. I don't know what bills due, and she has tried to shelter me from knowing that there's a bill due, and she doesn't want me feeling guilty because I'm sick and can't work. There's things sometimes we don't know, but if we know the who, the what, and the where behind it, instead of, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, instead of taking it personal, I think we'd be better off. You see, on the other end, we'll say from Sister Myers' end in the same scenario, let's just say Sister Myers is frustrated. She also has to realize the who, the what, and the where the problem is. Because if I come home from work and I've had a bad day or things are really getting to me, if I look at her like she is the target of my frustration, I have failed. Sometimes we fail to realize that, say 5 things have happened, 5 terrible things. You lost your keys. You finally found your keys, which actually happened to me the other day. You go to get in the truck. You realize it's out of gas. You're running late. You got to go by the gas station. You're going to be there late. You don't want to look like an idiot before your boss and whoever else. And you get there. They're complaining because they're saying you did something wrong the day before. Several things have happened. By the time you get home later in that day, you've had 5 things, we'll just say, happen to you. And all it takes is one funny look. Let's be real. One funny look. One snarky comment. Maybe somebody don't answer you fast enough. You have to understand the who, the what, and the where the problem is. You've had 5 other people during that day that have got on your nerves. Now, you didn't take it out on them, but this one person is going to get the brunt of everything you've dealt with all day. That's not fair, but it's a reality. Now, I want to show you the second thing. 2 parties have 2 responsibilities. One party must understand that the people they're taking the frustration out on is not the ones who caused them to be this upset to begin with. The other party has to understand that a level of tolerance must be given in remembering that we're all going to have bad moments and bad days. There are times that I've had to remind myself when my wife is a little upset. I've had to remind myself. I've got days. And sometimes if I don't remind myself, she'll remind me for myself. Well, honey, you get aggravated too. I'm frustrated. I'm angry right now. It's very important and vital for you to realize that you have to have a certain level of tolerance. You know the reason why a lot of marriages don't work is because there's no tolerance within the marriage. There are some things, and I'm not saying that people just should have a free pass to just act crazy. But there's got to be a level of tolerance. There's got to be times that you understand that some people may have an issue. You pray for them. You hope it gets better. But there are some things, if you don't have a level of toleration, you're never going to make it in a marriage. You're never going to really make it on a job. You know the reason why some people have one job and another job and another job, why some people go from relationship to another relationship? Because every relationship and every job is about me, myself, and I. And there's no tolerance for anybody or anything else. We never try to understand things from another person's position. We never try to put ourselves in their shoes. It's all about me. But 2 parties have responsibility. Second of all, we have to know when to be quiet. You got to know when to be quiet. That isn't that easy. Some of us like to talk. And I'm one of them. Many of us like to win too much, so we'd rather keep digging a deeper hole and deeper wounds than to just stop and walk away. When I was putting this together today, the Lord gave me an image in my mind that I want to paint on your mind for just a moment. Just imagine for just a moment that you've got a sharp, long-bladed knife. And you take that knife and you begin to push it down into someone's skin. As you begin to push it into the skin, you can stop after you hit the first layer. You may go a little bit further, and a little further. You got to understand something. It is in our control to stop and walk away. It's in our control to be able to just stop the argument, to quit trying to win, to quit trying to prove who's right, because the deeper that you push that blade in, the deeper the wounds become, and you can potentially hit a major artery if you go too deep, or an organ that can sever something to where that it's almost unrepairable. Something very important for you to understand. There are people, and I may touch on this in a little bit. I remember some time back, I had a young woman in my church who had battled with the idea that she was a little overweight. She would express that to us from time to time. But she had a husband who was one of those people I mentioned earlier with absolutely no filter. And probably shouldn't say this online, but if you look this picture up in the dictionary, underneath the word jerk, his picture might have just been there because of the way he treated her. And I hate to say that, but he was hateful, spiteful, and he didn't treat her like a woman ought to be treated. And one night, she told me that they were sitting around watching a television program. Some of you may have heard the program before. It's called something about Biggest Loser. I don't watch it. I don't like to see people without their clothes on. So they were watching this program, and apparently someone came out that was like 500 or 600 pounds, very overweight, didn't have a shirt on, and the husband looked over at his mother and his wife and said, "That's exactly what y'all look like. Y'all are disgusting. You look disgusting." Well, this young lady is the type of person who likes to have humor, to try to funny away her hurt and her pain. And she tries to make a joke out of it. But, you know, after a while, when people keep saying things, they keep driving that knife blade deeper and deeper, and you cut people in ways that sometimes you start severing ligaments and tendons and organs and arteries, and you start hurting people in a way, there are things they will never forget. And she said that night, she had come to church later, and she was crying. She told me, she said, "You know, Pastor, I really, really tried to hold it together tonight." And she started crying, and she said, "I really did." She said, "So I got up, I left the room, but he got up and followed me down the hall." Well, that's what you look like. I don't understand the reason why. What, you don't want to hear the truth and just kept flapping his gums, kept digging that knife blade deeper. Well, she did something that I do not advocate you do, but some of us, in a carnal way, you hate to admit it, you almost think, well, the guy deserved it. She turned around and socked him square in the face. Well, I don't advocate you doing that, but I want to tell you something. What happened that night is that blade got driven deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until it cut that woman in ways that even to this day, there are times that all she can hear in her ears, "You're so fat, you're so ugly," and her self-esteem is tanked out. If you call yourself a Christian and a man and you talk to your wife like that, you need somebody to flog you. You need somebody to whip you because you don't deserve a wife. And vice versa. If you're a wife and you talk to your husband like trash, you need to be convicted in your heart, and you need to fall headlong in an altar and pray through. And you know the reason why that we've got so much stuff going on in homes is because people are in their home and they think nobody else is watching, so they can get away with whatever they do. But there are things you say that are going to stick with somebody for years to come, and that are going to cut them going and coming, and you don't even have to say anything. It might have been 2 years ago, but that is something that sticks with them, and it's going to stick with them for years to come. But you got to learn how to be quiet. Sister Myers has been awful quiet tonight. But I told her, I said, you don't have to interject anything unless you feel led to. The second thing that I feel like may be a help to you tonight, and hopefully this is helping somebody, but we must refrain from name-calling, from demeaning, hurtful, hateful, destructive language. Just kind of tags right along with what I just said. You may feel like you won the argument, but you may leave the one who's been by your side when nobody else has been to hear those hurtful words on replay for years to come. How many times have you been able to walk away and puff your chest out? "Oh, I won that. I showed her who's boss. I let her know. I reminded her of just how nasty she is. I reminded her just how sorry and no good, no count for nothing she is." So you poke your chest out, square your shoulders back. You won the argument, you feel like. But what kind of damage have you done? And then later on, there are some people, they just pint it up. They just bottle it up. And then you're going to wonder, why in the world did she blow up on me and just about pull my hair out and tell me she wants a divorce? Could possibly be because you have continually battered, and you have continually done so much destructive damage until that person bottled it up all this time, and finally the top explodes, and it's like dumping Mentos in some diet soda. Disputes, domestic disputes. But I believe tonight, if you're going to have a healthy relationship, you have got to curtail. You have got to learn to quit using destructive language and defaming, hurtful things when you get angry. You got to quit calling people stupid to their face. "You're so stupid. Oh, you can't do nothing right. Oh, you're so fat. You're so dumb. You're just like your mama. Oh, that's the reason why you didn't even graduate high school. I don't want to hear anything from you." Let me tell you, as a pastor, I could tell you some stories. I've heard some stuff. Some of the most hurtful, ridiculous stuff coming out of people that call themselves Christian. And then come to church, talk in tongues, run an aisle, shout, get on to somebody else for not doing the right thing. And yet their kids are sitting around watching them like, well, I saw what you did yesterday, Daddy. I just seen what you did yesterday, Mama. And you want to know why your kids don't want nothing to do with church. And I know some may not want to for other reasons, but it doesn't give us an excuse not to get our act together. If you're at home, you ought to be able to say amen to that. So I want you to realize, number 3, you're going to have to be willing to let another person have space to cool off. You know, when you get into a disagreement or an altercation or a dispute, whether it's your kids, whether it's mom or dad, and by the way, sometimes we expect things out of our kids that we don't even live up to ourselves. You know, we run to God and want mercy, but when our kids need mercy or want mercy, we don't give no mercy there. You know, kids don't need a drill sergeant for a mom and a daddy. I believe you ought to be able to have a line and you ought to be able to have a standard. But I believe that kids need some love and compassion within the home and discretion and direction at the same time. But you got to be willing to give somebody some space. Do you remember what Abraham and Lot had and said, let us separate? What he was saying is we're not going to stop being family. We're not going to stop being husband and wife, but we need some space. There have been times that I've learned this through the years. In the heat of the argument, sometimes the best thing for me to do is get up. I had to do this just the other day. I got so frustrated with a situation, I just get up, go outside, go find something to work on, go get something to do. But let me tell you, one of the worst things you can do when somebody's trying to have a little space is get right on their heels, bark, 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 like a little barking chihuahua. Bark, 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 bark. Here's somebody's trying to get away from you, and you're going to get right up in there because, no, you're going to talk to me. You're going to hear me out. And you want to know why that there's trouble in the home? Sometimes people need just a little bit of space to cool down because those are sometimes the ones who will chase somebody down are sometimes some of the people who get their feelings hurt the most when they keep pushing those buttons until you do say something you regret. Because sometimes people know themselves and they know they have that tendency. They're trying to get away from you, so they don't explode on you and say something cruel or mean. So if you go and corner and box them in, what have you accomplished? Because when you do that, you're just continually driving that knife that I was talking about earlier, and you continually escalate things in that degree. We have to be able to have the ability to cool off. See, in my relationship, I'll be honest with you, in my relationship, I'm the type of person, I like to be able to deal with things, get it behind us so that I can be done and over with it. I don't like to drag things out for 2 or 3 days. We're going to be married. I don't plan on getting no divorce. Let's get this thing behind us and let's hug and kiss and go to bed. You know what I mean? But sometimes my wife is the type of person that needs a little bit of cool down space. It might take an hour. It might take 6 hours. Or she may need to go to bed without us talking. But I have to be able to respect and I have to be able to appreciate that and understand that we're not all geared and wired exactly the same. It's important that you husbands and wives and families understand we're not geared and wired exactly the same. And we need to be able to respect that space and that time to give them the time to cool down. You might be actually doing yourself a big favor. Because I've watched relationships before. As a pastor, I've dealt with this and counseled people where that if somebody would have just zipped it and would have let it go, it would have been all right. But then old stories start getting brought up, hurt feelings, somebody else, and then somebody else's name gets brought up, and before you know it, it turns physical. It turns physical. And you know what happens? I shared this in the beginning of this. You have such an image to uphold as a Christian. A lot of times people feel like, well, I can't share with anybody. I can't tell anybody. I can't talk to anybody because, you know, they'll question my Christianity and they'll judge me or whatever. And the reality is that this is where a lot of homes are tonight, and I'm worried and scared for some of these people who are going to end up losing their marriage and their bond with their kids. And I don't say worry in a lack of faith, but I'm saying I'm concerned about these people because as a pastor, if you let your marriage fall apart, if you let your home fall apart, you won't be the first person. Just this week, I sat down with someone who shared with me that there has been so much tension in their home that this past week that they considered taking a bottle of pills and ending their life. Just this week. The domestic tension. I don't know about you, but as a husband, I want to make sure that I'm not adding to the problem, that I am actually trying to help. These are things that we need to consider. You can't expect to box someone in when they're angry and think that they're not going to blow up on you. Number 4, we got to be able to look before the argument and beyond the argument. I want to share a personal testimony with you. These are things that I've had to actually do myself to get through stuff. My wife and I, as much as I love her, more than you'll ever know, we've got an amazing relationship. But there have been times that we got into a heated argument, and I will share. Let me say this. Maybe you at home that are watching, this is probably 98 to 99% of the time accurate, that the majority of our arguments have nothing to do with us. They're almost always somebody else that said or did something to do with our kids or family. Some other instigating factor. And there have been some times that I was so absolutely out of my mind frustrated that I may get in my truck and drive down the road and just sit there and park in a spot. And to be honest with you, if you've never been through that, maybe it won't make any sense. But you think to yourself, is this it? Is this the way we're going to go out? Is my marriage over? We're going to have to continue to deal with this the way it's always going to be? But like I said, you've got to be able to look before the argument and beyond the argument. There are times I'm so frustrated that you're sitting there, and I know what you do. You do the same thing probably I do, and you're thinking about all the reasons why you're right. Well, they shouldn't have said this. And I've been trying so hard. I've been trying to do this, and it's never good enough, and nobody understands. But I've had to look before the argument, and I got to look beyond the argument, and this is how I do it. I remind myself, I sit there and I remind myself of all the times that we've gone on little dinner dates, and we have some beautiful dinner dates. And I remember us sitting there smiling at each other across the table. The times that she just looks at me with her eyes, and she says, I just want you to know how much I love you. The times that I've got up early in the morning to go to work, and I open up my wallet or look over there, and she's left me a little note that says, I just want you to know how much I love you. I look before the argument, and I remember all the beautiful moments and times that we had. Why is that important? Because you have to be able to embrace this moment right here. You know what the devil likes to do? He likes to hold a magnifying glass over that one moment. Now, some people are having moments like that back to back to back, and I understand you're in a mess. And some people may say, we almost never have those moments, and my heart breaks for you. I can only pray for you because I know some people are in toxic situations. But I look before that moment, and I embrace that moment. And I also look beyond that moment. I look forward, and I say, those moments where we're sitting there making goo-goo eyes at each other across the dinner table, holding each other close, reminding each other of all the years that we've loved each other and how we want to die, with each other. I look beyond, and I start thinking about the times that we're going to be back together. Things are going to be okay. We're going to love each other again. We're going to get beyond this. Because let me tell you what happens to so many relationships, so many marriages, so many friendships, is we get caught up with what's going on right now. Maybe there's something going on in your family. Maybe people aren't talking to each other. And you got to be able to see before it, and you have to be able to see beyond it for you to be able to have or embrace any kind of hope that it's ever going to get better. And even if it never does get any better, there's nothing wrong with you trying within yourself to have a level of faith and hope to embrace what is beyond. Also, I want to share with you number 5. I've got just a few of these. But we have to know how to apologize. And I specifically wrote this down. Not, I'm sorry that you took it wrong. A lot of our apologies are about as empty as they can be. Well, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you took it wrong. Well, I know you know. Or you have people say, I'm sorry, but if you wouldn't have said so-and-so, then I wouldn't have done it. That ain't no kind of apology. You just want to make sure that they understand. Either make an apology genuine, real, and right, or save your breath. Because you can cause somebody more irritation towards you by fake, full of air. You ever see them orange Cheeto Puffs? I can't stand those things. That's about what some people's apologies are like. Yeah. Well, even if you like them, they still ain't worth nothing. Full of air, like cotton candy. Maybe sweet to the taste, but when you bite down, it don't fill your stomach. A lot of people's apologies are like that, and they're worthless. They're empty. They don't mean anything. If you intend to have any kind of relationship and health and wholeness within your home, you're going to have some kind of willingness to apologize when you're wrong. You need to actually go before the Lord and ask the Lord to show you where you are wrong. Well, I was right in 5 places, so I'm not going to say I'm sorry for that one wrong thing. You're wrong for feeling that way. Not just that, but number 6, we have to know that our children don't need to be pulled into our marriage disputes and forced to choose sides. You know how many homes are a train wreck right now because the parents have drugged their kids into their arguments and made them pick sides? Maybe you're listening and you were raised in a home like that. That's a horrible thing to do to a kid. And then later on, you're going to want those same kids to listen to their daddy, who that you've berated, trashed, talked about, to get on your side in an argument. But now, 2 months later, you want them to listen to their daddy when he says, go clean your room. They don't have no respect for him. You've already torn him down. I've seen homes before where that a husband who's supposed to be a head of a house has absolutely no respect, and it's not because he's not a good man, has no respect and no authority within that home at all. If he tells his kids to do something, or he says, I'm putting you on restrictions, 2 days later, mama comes along. He's been on restrictions long enough, so I'm taking him off of them restrictions. You got to be able to be on the same page within that relationship. You cannot be divided. The Bible said a house divided against itself cannot stand. And you wonder why there's so much turmoil in that home. You can't be working against each other. There are times that if you're arguing about some things, there's some things you need to take that argument in another room. Your kids may not even need to hear that stuff. But you definitely don't need to be dragging Johnny and Susie into your arguments and making them pick sides. Don't be having little powwows with your 5 or 10-year-old or even your 16-year-old like they're 32 years old. Don't you think your dad was wrong for doing that? Don't force your kids to pick sides. That's not fair to them. And it's not their job to pick sides. You're there to nurture them and to love them and to give them a good platform and a good upbringing. Sister Myers, you got anything to say? All right, Sister Myers, I'm doing okay. My big mouth. Number 6, we have to know that our children don't need to be pulled in our marriage disputes, forced to choose sides. Number 7, we got to learn what it means to respect confidentiality. This may seem like a small thing for some people, but I want to show you why this is so important. A lot of respect and trust is lost and sometimes permanently destroyed because someone did not value a person's trust to confide in them. I've had times before that I've had a family member that came to me and shared some things with me. And I think to myself, I realize that if I go and tell anybody else what that person said, that I make that person vulnerable and also tear down their reputation. You have to be able to respect that confidence that they have to confide in you. But I've had other times where I've gone to somebody and I've shared something that I was really troubled about. And then they go and tell somebody else. By the time it gets to you, it's 5 stories different than what you said, twisted up and everything else. And you know what that tells me? That tells me I'm not going to tell you nothing else. And you know what's sad about that? Because sometimes it's good to have somebody that we can go to and share our heart with so that we can get things out, so that we can get some closure and we can bleed out a little bit and we can be able to open up. Sometimes we need that. But whenever you have no one you can trust, because everybody has such a big mouth that goes say everything that you tell them, you can't talk to anybody. I was telling my wife here a while back, it was a situation. I have had people over the years that I wanted to help, to be able to forewarn them about something that could happen because of another person that has a reputation for doing a certain thing. But I cannot trust that person to share with them anything because they will go back and tell the other person, yeah, he said this or he said that. When your goal as a pastor is trying to protect somebody, as to spare the flock. Sister Myers is going to share something.
Okay, I've held my peace long enough. Well, mine's working good. I don't like my phone anyway. But several things I wanted to say, just some of the things that Brother Myers has said, and we do have the Lord has blessed us to have a good marriage. This one's loud, but I am thankful. But what I was going to say is, a lot of times there's things I don't want to talk about at that moment. You know, and we have to respect that also. We've done that in our marriage, and I'm thankful to the Lord that we do. But there's a lot of times there's something I'm trying to work out within myself that I'm trying to, the Lord's dealt with me about, that I need to pray about, or that I need to get under the blood, or you know, a feeling that I have. But for women are the weaker vessel in a lot of instances, and sometimes we do need that nurturing and that love and that, you know, I've talked to patients before, you know, when it's just you and the patient. A lot of times they like to share things with you, and I had a patient one day, and he said, I just don't understand my wife. She just always seems upset. And I took a deep breath, and I said, have you ever thought that maybe she was struggling with something that she just doesn't want to talk about right now? And he said, well, I try to make her happy. I said, sometimes it don't have anything to do with you making her happy. You could buy her the fanciest car, and you could, I've told Brother Myers this before, material things don't move me. Money doesn't move me. Those things don't change me. You don't have to go buy me a new pair of shoes or buy me a new skirt or a new top or whatever. You don't have to go buy me hair accessories, which he doesn't do those things, just in case, you know. I mean, there's certain things I just got to pick out. Can't be picking out my pocketbook. I got to pick out my own pocketbook. So, but my point is this, you know, he would buy me the world if I would let him do that. That doesn't prove his love to me. It's the times when we get in that argument and that problem that the way that we're able to work it out proves our love for each other. And not just that, but I know he was talking about looking at the beginning of the relationship, looking at the end, or the beginning of the argument, looking at the end of the argument. When the argument's over, I love him. I don't just love him because I gave a commitment to God, but I love him because he's mine. I chose him, and I want to be with him the rest of my life. So I love him. So we're going to work it out because I can't love anybody else. I only love him. And it's important to realize that betrayal is huge for pastors' wives. When you feel betrayed by somebody, you have to put on that face. A lot of times in service, a lot of people tell me, you know, we was watching you tonight. I had a sister tell me one day, she said, you know, I was watching you tonight when Pastor was preaching. You just weren't getting in like you normally do. You got something wrong with you? And I took a deep breath, and with the wisdom of the Lord, I said, well, sister, sometimes you can't always scream amen when your mouth's full. You know, when I'm feeding myself and I need that feeding of the Lord and the word that he's given that man of God, I'm eating. I'm filling my mouth full. And I notice a lot of times I'll glance over and everybody's looking at me, see what I'm going to say or do. You know, and it's not in a bad way, but it's to see what I'm thinking about what he's saying. I got enough of a relationship at home that I know what he's going to say and what he's not going to say, you know, because we have that relationship. And how do we get that? Through prayer, through reading, through praying. There's times, Sister Myers can admit, Brother Myers can admit, there's times I'll say, baby, pray for me. He'll say, well, let's pray together. I'll say, I just don't feel like I could find any words right now to pray. I just need you to pray for me. I need you to hold me up. I just can't right now. sometimes betrayal is something that you never can fully trust someone except the Lord. Because when you've got nobody else to lean on, you've told your husband and you just don't feel like he understands completely, or you told your best friend or your daughter or whoever it is that you've talked to, and you just have to find that place to just pour out to the Lord. There's sometimes, I don't get angry a lot. We don't fight a lot or have loud discussions much, but when we do, a lot of times it's because I'm already fighting something else, and I just need to find a place to cry out to God. I don't really need him pawing on me or talking to me or trying to ask me what I need or what I want or any of those things. I'm already struggling with things. On a woman's side, you already struggle with not being able to, I've told my ladies before, you may have all the dishes done in the house, everything be great, but the laundry needs to be done. Or you may have all the laundry and the dishes done, but the floors need to be swept and mopped. You may have, all those things done, but you just feel like you haven't done something else in your life that you need to do. Your car's a mess or needs to be washed or whatever. And so you always feel like you're shortcoming, like you're not getting to that point where you can do everything at one time. And I've reminded my ladies before, that's why they had concubines in the Old Testament. I said, if I just had several of me, I could say, you go make sure the floors are clean. You go make sure the laundry's done. You go make sure the dishes done. But the thing is, that's how we grow to be strong, is when we go to the Lord and I'm able to say, Lord, I just don't feel like I can do it all. And I'm trying, and I'm doing my best to, but I just don't feel like I can do it all. That's the times and the struggles that we have to give it to God. Sometimes our husband can't fix it. Sometimes our wife can't fix it. Sometimes it's just God that can fix it. And so, I want to encourage us tonight, and Brother Myers still got some things to say, but we've got to give it over to God. We've got to take that time to pray. Sometimes when I notice that my spirit's low, or I'm agitated, or I'm frustrated, it's because I haven't given myself enough to the Lord. And so my spirit is low because I'm longing for him. I need to plug back into that power source and get filled back up, and get the nutrients that I need that only God can give to a Christian or a child of God.
One of the things that is going to help a lot of families is if we'll just get back to God, if we'll get back down on our knees, be praying and seeking the Lord. A lot of the problems that happen in marriages are because people are drifting away from the Lord. But I don't want you to think that it's all just that. I've seen families before that they seem to be doing so good at church, and then they go home and everything falls apart. It's hard to understand and put your finger on. But I do want to say something about what Sister Myers had said, because it reminded me. When you live with somebody, when you have been married or you've been around somebody for a long time, you start learning the things they struggle with. And when you identify with those things, don't ever use those weaknesses as a weapon in an argument. I've lived with my wife long enough to know that I have watched her through the years. We almost practically grew up together. But I have watched my wife deal with betrayal on several occasions during her life and while we've been married, with other people that she has dealt with betrayal from. And it is a very, very, very touchy thing for her. I know that. I've seen it. And when you know a person's vulnerabilities, you have to be able to give place of compassion, pray for them, and to be able to uphold them in those areas. My wife's lived with me long enough. She knows some of my childhood and things I've gone through in my life and things I've struggled with, and she knows I have certain insecurities. So there are times that she may have said, I love you 5 minutes ago, and I'd look at her and say, you love me, don't you? Or there may be areas of my life that are real touchy that we begin to know. You don't ever use those things as a weapon. You don't ever use those things against that person, because when you are in a union together, you're there to hold each other up. And when you recognize those weaknesses, you're there to come to their rescue and encourage them. And when we hit those weak places, sometimes those things turn into other emotions like frustration and anger. And I have to realize that. And that leads me to something that I want to tell you is very important tonight. You hear people say that a part of marriage is learning, what to say and what to do. I want to tell you tonight, a lot of marriage and a lot of relationships and having a good union has a lot to do with knowing what not to say and what not to do. When you get to know somebody really well, you start learning the things that are going to hurt and rip and tear. If you use those things for your own favor, for your own arsenal to win an argument, shame on you. But when you start getting to know each other, you start knowing the things that are going to make them the most upset. And if you want peace in your marriage, you want peace in your home, learn what things that will set somebody off, and don't do those things. Try hard to keep that peace within the home. A lot of people right now are at home because of this lockdown and whatnot. We don't know how long it's going to last, but I believe we have a duty as a Christian to make sure that we are upholding these things. I've got a few more things, but I'm not going to hold you much longer. I want to apologize if we've gone too long tonight, but I'm hoping that some of the things that we've shared with you may be a help in some way. And I want to give Sister Myers an opportunity before I close. This is all freelance. We didn't talk about anything. I told her I wanted her to join me tonight. I told you I'm stepping away from the traditional way of doing things and just doing some different things I've never done. And I really felt led to do this tonight. But I'm going to give her an opportunity here in just a minute to maybe share from a pastor's wife's perspective, maybe something that she's had to do to keep herself encouraged during all that she's gone through. Because I realize that there are some of you, maybe a handful that may get a hold of this video now or sometime after, who may be a pastor's wife, or maybe you're in ministry, or maybe you're in a leadership position, and there's been times of your ministry where that you just felt like, you know what, I want to throw my hands up. I'm done. We sacrifice for so many people. We do so much for other people. I've had times before that we've gone to, we finally got a dinner date. We finally was able to sit down at a restaurant to enjoy dinner after not being able to spend time with each other, running. We go in, we order our food, we sit down, and my phone rings, and somebody's on the other end of the phone from church, or somebody's got a problem, and they're crying on the other end, and I can't hear very well. I've got to step out, and I go outside, and I sit down on the bench out there while I try to console and help somebody else while my dinner date is in there sitting down. Our food is getting cold, and we're making those sacrifices. And then the very same people that you sacrifice for and do for hurt you so bad sometimes, and sometimes you get to a place where you just feel like giving up. Maybe you feel like quitting. And I know that this may not have all exactly to do with everything we've talked about, but I just felt like asking her that tonight, because I feel like there may be somebody watching tonight. Maybe she can share something that has encouraged her, or some way she's encouraged herself to keep her focus when she's been hurt the most, to keep getting up and keep going after all these years.
Well, the thing that comes to my mind the most is we have to remember that, when our husbands is called to preach, it's not just them called to preach. I shared this story with a friend of mine recently, and she didn't even remember it, but I was in the church service. We were new Christians, and I had been praying, and only me and the Lord knew the things that I had been dealing with. Most of y'all know I'm not musically inclined. I don't play the piano or any instrument, and don't sing unless I'm singing with a group of people that nobody can hear me. So I was praying, and she came over to me. It's just a little house church. Wasn't like, a big church or big fancy people were there. Just down-to-earth, real Christians. And as she came by, she went to walk past me, and she stopped. I'll never forget. She turned around. She laid her hands on me, and she prayed for me. And she told me, she leaned down, and she said, Sister Cristi, you don't understand that you have to walk worthy of the call of God. And, I cried, but I thought, what does that mean? Walk worthy of the call of God. How can you walk worthy, in my mind, worthy meaning prideful or arrogant, or, I got something nobody else has type of thing. And So I went home, and I remember we were not in our own area, so we were staying with some friends that afternoon to go back to church that night. And I was laying across the bed, and I got to thinking about what she had said. And I said, Lord, I don't understand. I want you to help me understand what that means. I mean, I never doubted what she told me wasn't of God. I just doubted my own self. And the Lord spoke to me, and he said, quit walking ashamed of what I've given you. It's not just a calling on your husband. I didn't call just him. I called you too. And I've told people before, it's a ministry. It's a calling. If Brother Myers decides tomorrow, I don't want to serve God, I still got to serve God. I still got to obey the Lord. I've still got to do those things. And I spoke a little bit earlier about betrayal and not trusting people. And a lot of times you feel, that the pastor is the one that needs all the credit, or the pastor's the one that gets all the credit. Not that you feel like you need something or want something, but that they're the ones that deserve it. And I've said a lot of times on pastor appreciations, baby, this is your pastor appreciation. You've worked all this year to deserve all this. And he's like, no, honey, we are a team. And it is a team effort. When he's down, I'm up. When I'm up, he's down. And did I say that right? Okay. And so, a lot of times he'll come to me, and it's raw. I come to him, and I just, don't take this wrong, but I just got to tell you, this is bothering me, and that's bothering me. And sometimes I'll say, I don't really want your opinion. I just want to tell you. I just want to empty out and tell you how I feel so that you understand why I feel this way. You can't always do that with other people. You can't always tell people, call somebody on the phone and say, well, I'm feeling a little depressed today, or I'm feeling a little discouraged today. The whole church would be, oh, Sister Myers is upset, or the pastor's wife's upset. Well, I'm upset too. And so you got to keep a lot of stuff to yourself. You can't lay it all on your husband or your partner or your the other person the Lord called on. You got to hold on to it. And I had to learn over the years how to hold on to it. How to keep from letting myself leak out in the wrong areas that didn't need to be leaked in. How to not take it out on someone else, like Brother Myers was saying earlier. Not to, I've been aggravated with one person, somebody on the phone or whatever, and hang up the phone and my kids say, Mom, what's for dinner? And I'm like, what do you mean what's for dinner? I've taught you how to cook. You can cook for yourself. And I didn't mean it for them, and I didn't sin or anything. I'm just like, seriously, I need help here. I need to be able to let this out. I can't hold it all in. And it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to have to empty out. It's okay to, sometimes I'll say, baby, I love you. Over the years that we've been together, 30-something years we've been together, married 27 in October, it's nothing against you. It's not that I don't want to be around you. I just need to be alone, just me and God. I just need to know how to handle this and deal with it. Or when someone's not treating my man the same. He's not just my husband. He's my pastor. He's my, he's my soldier on the battlefield. He's my person to lean on. I know he's got my back. If I get wounded, he's going to carry me. If he gets wounded, I'm going to carry him. And it makes me upset when I know that people do things to him or say things to him. And he may say, oh, I just blew it off. Well, he might have blown it off, but I didn't blow it off. It bothered me what someone said. It bothered me what someone did. It's okay to feel that way. You just got to know what outlet to put it in. It's okay that he said something that may have made me upset. He doesn't normally do that. We don't normally, like I said, have those issues like that because we've been together so long. We know how each other runs. I know how he ticks. He knows how I tick. But I also know how the Lord ticks. And I know after serving him and, scooching up to the Lord that I don't put all my confidence just in my husband or my pastor. I put all my confidence in the master, the one that is the deliverer, the one that continues to feed me those things I need, the one that when I pull up to that table and dine, I know he's going to pass me what I need. I tell Pastor all the time, what would you like for dinner? And, of course, he don't think about dinner all day. I am. I'm thinking, while I'm working, I got to hurry up and do this. What did I lay out for dinner tonight? Got to make sure I cook. Why do I cook? Because I'm trying to please him or trying to cook for my children or whatever. I could care less. I've said before. I'll go to bed with nothing to eat, or I'll go to bed with cereal, or I'll go to bed, eating something small. But I do it to please him. And so a lot of times I'll say, not because I want him to make the menu or not because I want him to tell me, but a lot of times I want to know what he's craving. I'll say, well, what don't you want? Just normally a conversation goes like this. Hey, baby, I'm on my way home from work. What do you want for dinner? And his answer is always, normally, well, I don't know, honey. I hadn't thought about it. Well, is there something you don't want? Well, I don't want, it's normally, I don't want pizza, and I don't want, what do you normally always say? Something else. He doesn't, he wants something home-cooked meal. He wants, the meat and fiddles, the fixins, the things that fill you up. And so, but he always says, whatever's easiest for you. If I come home and make hot dogs, he's not real fond of hot dogs, but he'll eat them. But he knows I'm not making them just to be out of meanness. I'm making them because I'm exhausted or I'm tired. We've got to have that relationship. It's the same with the Lord. He knows I'm not going to cook something intentionally that he doesn't like. So my meaning of what I'm saying is, I know when I pull up to the table and dine with my master, he's not going to give me something that's not good for me. It may be bitter at first. It may not taste as good at first. I may taste my food and I'll say, I'm the first person to say, baby, that has a little bit of too much salt in it. I'm sorry. Or, baby, that's a little dry. I'm sorry. Why do I do that? Because I already know and I see and I'm critical on it. He may say, well, I thought it was good. Well, I didn't, so I may not have cared for it. I know when I sit down at the table and I dine with the master, he's not going to give me something I don't need. It may not taste as good. It may feel dry at first. It may go the wrong way. But I've got to be able to know how to accept that and receive that, and to put my confidence in. And the Lord gave us the opportunity and the pleasure, or it's his pleasure to see us walk in truth and to be happy. And he gave us what he giveth, he can take away just as quick as he gave it to us. And he gave us this church. It's not our church. It's God's church. It's not us, it's God. And so when we put our confidence in the one that gives, we're able to receive those things. And so, a lot of times I tell my people at church, I know things I don't, when I'm teaching Sunday school things, I know things that I don't want to say that I know may rub somebody the wrong way. I know if someone came to me that week and said, I just found out that my husband's cheating on me, I'm not going to bring it up in the lesson because, though it may be an example, I'm not going to bring that up. Why? Because I don't want to rub them wrong. The same with the Lord. What he gives us is for our own good. And what our pastor or our husband or our helpmate gives us is for our own good. And sometimes, I've told him before, like he said in the beginning, you're not always compassionate with me as you are with other people. But he don't need to be as compassionate. I can't take that compassion. I need it that way. I need him to just say, babe, you got the wrong spirit. I may not like it, but I'll be like, I do? Well, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had the wrong spirit, or I didn't know that, or, babe, this time it's not the wrong spirit. This time it's whatever, and he may say, oh, I didn't know that. You never know what someone's going through, and you never know what the Lord's put on that person or what the desire in their heart is. When you feel like you're always falling short, or you feel like you're never able to keep up with everything, or you're just exhausted. Sometimes at night, I get home, I've had a rough day mentally, physically, emotionally, things going on, watching people sick or dying, or knowing that, someone just passed away and their age or it was a baby or whatever it is, and it weighs on me, and I come home and he's trying to tell me something, and to him, it's so important. He wants to tell me, but to me, I could literally care less at the time because I'm so tired. Not that I could care less about him, but could care less about what was important to him to tell me that day. And that's marriage. That's being raw. I may say, baby, I love you, and I say it a lot. And I do care about what you're saying, but right now I'm so tired I can barely hold my eyes open. But if you'll get me tomorrow when I'm maybe awake more, I can understand. But that's exactly how we are with the Lord. He's never too tired. We always feel like, well, I don't want to bombard him, or I don't want to. Sometimes when I pray, I say, Lord, I don't want to ask you for anything. You already know what my desires are. I just want to love on you a little while. I just need to love on you because I know in return you're going to give me that love. I know in return you're going to give me what I need. And so the best advice I can give to someone is give it to the Lord. You can't always talk to your pastor about it. because you can't always talk to your people about it. You've got to be able to have that relationship where when you come to the feet of Jesus and you're just him and you, that you know he knows the real you. You know, and you've got to be real. You've got to give. You've got to find a place to give yourself to receive from, to get fed from, and that's usually from the Master's table.
We're going to get ready to close right here. So the answer to that question is, all these years, how have I made it? I didn't put all my confidence in my husband, my pastor. I put him in the Master. So I appreciate all of you and the opportunity that we've had to share with you, to bring the Word of God and some of the thoughts and what have you into your homes. And hopefully that everything has gone okay tonight with the broadcast. Everyone's been able to be a part of it. God bless all of you. And Sister Myers, are you able to go ahead and turn everything off? God bless all of you. Hopefully we get to hear or see each other, talk to each other this coming Sunday.